The State of Crypto is presented by Tron, connecting the world to the power of cryptocurrency.
Sam BankmanFried is set to face a cross-examination by federal prosecutors today after doubling down on the narrative that FTX failed due to mistakes. Joining us now is Hodder Law Firm founder Sasha Hodder. Welcome back to the show, Sasha.
Hey, thanks for having me this morning.
All right, a lot has gone down in the Sam BankmanFried criminal trial. What do you think of Sam's testimony on Friday in front of jurors? Was it compelling?
I don't see how a juror could be convinced by Sam Bankman-Fried's testimony. You know, as soon as he opened, he tried to correct the narrative. He came in, they asked, "Did you defraud anyone?" He said no. They said, "Did you take any customer funds?" He said no. And, you know, we've just seen weeks of evidence of him taking customer funds. So I don't know how he can sit there with a straight face and say that. He admitted that he made a number of small and large mistakes, and his biggest mistake was not having a dedicated risk management team. But, we'll see how the jury looks at it. He really tried to distance himself from the allow negative code, saying that Gary Wang and Nishad Singh had authority to make actions without consulting with him. And, he explained away Alameda, the fact they had 7 different balance sheets, just by saying, this accounting bug created an $8 billion hole. It wasn't his political donations. He thought it was just an accounting bug. So, he's going to just he tried, and I think Friday went fairly well for him compared to how it's going to go today and tomorrow. But he had his own attorneys asking him questions. They were all very practiced responses, and him trying to distance himself from the criminal intent element.
Sasha, I've asked almost all of our legal experts who've come on the show this. What's the likelihood, what are the chances that he's able to convince at least one juror given his testimony so far?
I would put it at 0. I can't speak for the jury, obviously, but he does not convince me of anything. And I just think, any reasonable person is going to sit there and see him as the, egomaniac fraudster that he is. Just the fact that he takes the stand in his own criminal trial, or that we're even at trial to begin with and wasting everyone's time for, several weeks like this, when he was probably offered a deal and everyone around him took deals, but he thinks he can get off. He's just got this way of thinking that he's above the law and he's the smartest guy in the room and he can convince anyone of anything. But if you listen to him talk, I went back and I listened to some of those old Twitter spaces, and he's not very articulate, and he doesn't deliver his answers with conviction that I think will convince any juror. So
this sounds like you think this is a mistake.
I think it's a huge mistake for him to have taken the stand. And sure, he might have been able to humanize himself a little bit on Friday in front of the jury with his own, distancing himself from that fraud narrative. But taking the stand opens himself up to today's cross-exam. And I think he's just going to get skinned alive by these seasoned prosecutors who, they're not the people on Twitter spaces who were asking him, questions last November. These are people who have spent their career learning how to get someone to admit criminal intent. And he's got, they've got 1 million pages of discovery of his transcripts of everything he said. So he can't lie, or it's going to be noticed. And under pressure, how's he going to answer these questions for 2 days straight of just drilling him about what happened? I think he's going to get flustered. He's going to start showing his tics. He's going to start mouthing words before answering them. And he just looks very, like he's going to look guilty, and it's not going to be good for the jury. And the judge, too, doesn't seem to have much sympathy for him. Judge Kaplan is a no-nonsense kind of guy. And when SBF goes into these big, long, evasive answers where he just poses more questions, he just really doesn't say anything when he talks, I think it's going to really annoy the jury and the judge.
Last week, the judge sent the jury away. Sam had a chance to testify just in front of the judge, and we saw a cross-examination there that was very similar to what you just described. Do you think that could be a benefit to him, almost like a practice run? He may be able to work on some of those tics and some of those answers?
Yeah, certainly. It was kind of bizarre for him to get a whole day of this like practice mock trial kind of situation. But from what I read, he used the time to try and blame everything on others, especially his former in-house counsel, Daniel Friedberg. And you can't bring that defensive counsel defense up unless you notice it properly ahead of time, and you give the government, you waive your attorney-client privilege by doing that. So I think that's where he thought he could go with it, which is a real amateur kind of thing. Oh, I'll just blame my lawyer. But in this case, he's got this lawyer, Daniel Friedberg, not funny, but like that Daniel Friedberg was at the center of the Ultimate Bet scandal a decade ago, and he was allegedly caught on camera advising Ultimate Bets that it was okay to code in a cheat that led to Ultimate Bets stealing a ton of money from all their customers. So, I'm kind of surprised they didn't go with the defensive counsel here, because if the jury knew about Daniel Friedberg's history with Ultimate Bets, they could possibly believe that Friedberg actually knew about this allow negative code and was bribed or paid off enough to look the other way or advise how to hide it, and if they could get that shown, then SBF could get off, but it's not coming in, and the jury's not going to hear about that.
Yeah, and that's an interesting. Ultimate Bets, of course, is where I believe Stuart Hoagner wasn't he involved with that? The fellow from Tether.
I'm not sure. I just know Friedberg was.
Yeah, there was. It was. It's an interesting connection all of them have. Just saying.
Yeah.
Just saying. There's no sketchiness whatsoever. But do you think that this was nonetheless a situation where? Do you think Sam pushed for himself to go on the stand? Or do you think that his lawyers just are awful?
I totally think he pushed to have trial to begin with, and he's the one that pushed to get on the stand. I can't imagine his lawyers thinking this is a good idea, but in criminal law, the lawyers aren't allowed to take away the chance for a defendant to try and paint their picture or tell their side of the story. But the fact that they have, by taking the stand, they're open to cross-exam. Everyone usually, criminal defendants don't take the stand for the reason of what's about to happen today, where they're going to get questioned and cross-examined. And usually the prosecutors are able to prove their side pretty easily with a criminal defendant, because they have all this experience of how to ask the right questions and how to lead the person down this path to self-destruction.
Sasha, you're focused on helping crypto entrepreneurs navigate the regulatory landscape in the United States. Has this case changed the way you advise your clients?
Yeah, well, I think this case, I'm excited for it to wrap up and for it to be put behind us, because I think it made the whole industry look bad. It created a lot of negative attention. I don't know if this particularly is what caused this Operation Choke Point 2.0, but no one will bank a lot of crypto companies anymore. And that's very detrimental to someone trying to do business. And they're having to go to these international banks, or there's a few still left in the US, but it really took a big chunk out of the industry, losing all of its banking relationships. And I blame Sam for that largely. Mm-hmm.
If we step back a little bit, it's not just Sam, right? It's the Do Kwons, it was the BitConnect folks, mm-hmm. It was Mt. Gox, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, like, we step back and we look at this, and it's scandal and fraud and mischief left and right. At what point is part of the problem, first of all, that after 12, 15 years of this, that we haven't seen massive adoption of crypto or a significant adoption of crypto, that the only thing that survives the only thing going around right now is a lot of hot air. Number one. Number two is another problem that why are such shady characters? We always say there's shady characters everywhere. Yes, the criminals use fiat all the time, but it just seems like there's such a collection of like Batman villains doing this. What's going on?
Well, I heard you before coming on saying that you thought a lot of the pump in the price even could be due to, my insinuation of what you said is like maybe Hamas is buying a lot of Bitcoin and that's where the pressure is coming from, and it's not coming from an ETF and like that. It's like, it could
also be Iran. It could also be Iran buying it on their behalf. They have a lot of Bitcoin accounts. There's
yeah. And I think that was disproven, or at least Nick Carter has been taken to Twitter the last, week saying these numbers are wrong. Chainalysis showed it wasn't used for these terrorist activities in the scale that it was originally reported. And, so I'm a big believer in Bitcoin, and what you said, I don't like the Bitcoin bros, and I kind of consider myself in that camp, I guess. So I think
you're okay.
There's all these, it's been a lot of shady characters, you're right, like the Do Kwons and everyone in all this crypto, but there's still a core difference between the crypto lending and the kind of altcoin bonanza and DeFi markets and everything compared to actual Bitcoin, which has a lot of merits and can help a lot of people. And, it's got this ETF coming and might be, I think that's what's driving it, is that all of a sudden we're going to see a lot of these investment advisors being able to buy it for their retail clients, which hasn't been something like it. Once an ETF is approved, it's no longer something that's in the shadows. It's just another normal and valid asset class. So I think maturity is what will shake out a lot of those bad actors.
Sasha, we are going to have to wrap it there. We're running out of time, but thanks so much for joining us this morning. It's always a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you.
That was Hodder Law Firm founder Sasha Hodder.